All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and I'm here today with my partner, Chris from Actionable Books. Chris Taylor is the founder and CEO of Actionable Books, and I'll tell you more about him in a moment. But as we're starting the hour, I want to just share a few housekeeping items with you. The first is that we invite you to live tweet during this event, and as Chris gets into his presentation, you'll see the hashtag and also a Twitter handle that you can use for Actionable Books throughout this event. We're super curious to hear from you what drew you to today's event, and this is a great time for you to get comfortable with our question panel on GoToWebinar. So if you could take a quick minute to find the question panel and to let us know what it is that you do for a living and what drew you to today's event. I also always love to hear about the weather. Chris, where are you calling in from today?
Today I'm in Toronto, and it is beautiful and sunny. It's still very chilly in the Great White North, but it's good. A nice light pouring in here, feeling good.
I know, it's awesome. So wherever you're calling in from today, I would love to have you tell us in the question panel so that we can see where you're calling in from, and then also what it is that you do for work that has drawn you to our event today. The title of our event today is The Consultant Paradox, Growing Your Practice Intelligently. And I know, Chris, that I'm so interested in learning from you. On some of the tweets, I saw this idea of trading dollars for hours, and I'm personally not a fan of that at all. And I'm sure those who are joining us today are looking forward to getting a different perspective as well. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been working at Actionable Books?
Yeah, absolutely. I started it as a passion project back in 2007. I went on this personal crusade of reading one book per week for a year with the idea of not just reading the book, but actually applying an idea from each book into my life or business. And I created the site purely as a personal accountability tool, knowing that if I had the general public, or certainly my mom, checking every Tuesday to see that that was happening, then it would hold me that much more to it. And it was beautiful. It sort of took off and took a life of its own, and I went full-time with the company in 2009, May of 2009, so now almost 6 years. Yeah.
Awesome. And there's one more thing I want to make sure that our listeners know about you, Chris, and about how, today you're calling in from Toronto, but different times I've spoken to you and gotten this view of Panama. So tell us a little bit about your choices as it relates to work-life balance.
Yeah, so when I started the business formally in 2009, my wife and I had really two objectives. One was that I could do work that I loved on a daily basis, and the second was that we'd be able to do it from anywhere in the world. And so we intentionally and deliberately structured the business in a way that would allow us and me to work from anywhere. And then in 2011, sort of put that to the test, and we've been moving around the globe, living in various spots, usually for somewhere between 3 to 6 months, Spain, Panama, Bali, Toronto, Australia, some other spots that we're, and continue to look for the next adventure.
That is absolutely amazing. So, Chris, I want to give you a little bit of insight into some of our listeners before we jump into your content. We have Kathy, who's an outcome strategist from Cleveland, Ohio. We have Santiago from Uruguay, who works in a 3PL company. We have some callers from Washington, Utah, Boston, people in various roles, and I'll share that with you after. But it seems like we have a good mix of consultants from around the world joining us today, Chris.
Nice. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's always a pleasure.
I'm going to mute myself and let you take over with the content.
All right. Perfect.
All right.
Here we go.
I'll be back on with some questions at the end of the hour.
Sounds great. Thanks, Becky. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it, and I hope it's valuable for you. Give you a little bit of context with Actionable Books and how we got to here. Basically, since 2009, as I mentioned beforehand, we've been working with really three distinct groups of individuals. One is authors and helping to spread the message from popular business books, which is actually how Becky and I originally connected with some of the authors that she works with and being able to help spread the good word there. And then we work with engaged employees, so our core programs called Actionable Workshops are designed to create better conversation in the workplace. And as we got into that space around creating better relationships and giving tools to team leaders so that they could build strong relationships, we started to come across this wonderful breed of human called consultant, and really connected with these impassioned individuals who believe strongly in the importance of improving the world of work. And so I've had the pleasure over the last really 4 years of working with thousands of consultants from around the globe, working in a myriad of industries. And one of the repeated challenges that have come up for them in the conversations I've had is this frustration. They're extremely technically competent, they're experts in their field, and then they hit a ceiling where they're busy, right, with client work, doing a lot, but not able to get beyond a certain point in growing their business. And then, of course, those of you who are solo consultants know this feeling. When you go on vacation for your much deserved rest, you're not making any money. And so how do you move past that where you actually have a business that continues to generate revenue for you and, ultimately equity in a way that, stays true to your integrity and what you want to do with your practice? So I've had, again, thousands of conversations. We've helped hundreds of consultants to overcome this paradox. And when Becky asked if I wanted to connect with the group, I said yes and on that, because it's one of those issues that so many of us deal with. So that's really the context on where we're coming from today. I'm going to share with you over the course of the next sort of 40 minutes some of the top insights that I've seen from the consultants who have successfully sort of pushed through that barrier. And then I'm also going to point you to a couple of resources. We have a couple other areas that if you want more information, there's other places you can go. So as far as I'm concerned, where we're going today, we're going to talk about the 3 factors that are most limiting for our growth as typically sole practitioners or independent consultants. And by the way, when I say consultant, this is really anybody selling an intangible that traditionally has required your time, where you are getting paid to deliver. I'm going to talk about the #1 tactic that I've found for doubling business. Actionable Books has doubled in size every year for the last 3 years, really holding true to one core tool and focus. So I'm going to share that with you. And then my belief on the importance of vision and reconnecting with why you're in this in the first place, because it's easy to get caught up in the busy work, and we really want to reconnect and set that time to reconnect with why you're doing this and where you're going. And then, as mentioned, I'll share a couple other tools that we have for you at the end. So as long as everyone's in the right room, I can move into the rest of it here. Oh yeah, before I do, if you want to continue the conversation online, either during the session or after the session, you can use the hashtag consultant paradox and connect with other people on the call through that. And if you want to talk to us directly, you can tweet to Actionable at Actionable Books. And Andy Budgell, our managing editor and community liaison, is standing by to answer any questions and to help facilitate the conversation. Okay, so as far as we've discovered, there's thousands of things that could be limiting growth, but there's 3 key factors that affect almost all of us. And that's what I want to focus on. These are the 3 factors that so many of us wrestle with. It's this idea that we have a shortage of time, we have a shortage of money, and we can have a shortage of clarity or vision, or 6 years ago when we started the practice, we had a clear sense of where we wanted to go, and we haven't checked in on it since. And the first 2 in particular, this time and money, is really what we refer to as the consultant paradox. And if you see this graph that I've put on the screen there, I promise it's the only graph I have for those not into numeric data. But this sort of representational of your calendar year, right? And your schedule will be different and your sort of flow will be different. But it's this idea that we're in flat-out sales mode. Call it business development mode, call it client generation mode, whatever you want. But we are trying to find the next gig, right, or next gigs. And then as we find that next gig, the amount of time required to actually deliver to that client and deliver to the standard that you've come to be known for requires that the time spent on sales goes down. And so we end up in client delivery mode, we're billing, we're making money, it's all good. Then the client gig ends or winds down, we take a little bit of a break because we're exhausted, and then we start to ramp up sales activities again. But as you've likely seen and discovered in your own practice, it takes time to secure that next client. And so we go through a period of days, weeks, months where there's actually no income or very little income. Just when we're starting to stress out about it, then we get that client again, and then the sales disappears, and we get into this cycle of really trading time for dollars, where we are on site for a client, we're in sales mode, we're going back and forth. And there's always this thought that, if we just had a little more time, then we could do both, right? And then, but we don't have more time. And if we just had a little bit more money, then we could hire somebody to maybe take over a piece of this, and then we would have more time. And so one would feed into the other, but it's how do you get started, right? And when you're growing a business of any kind, your options are really to bootstrap it or to bring in money from outside. And bringing in money from outside is difficult. First of all, it's hard to do, particularly when you are the product, to get people to actually put money into that. And secondly, you may not want to. You may not want to give up control or partial ownership on the company. You may want to retain 100% of that for yourself, and that's totally cool. But how do you overcome that? And this is the challenge that we see for consultants on a regular basis. The goal here is really to get towards consistent growth. And what we have seen is that there are 3 tools that can help you to actually create more time and generate more money in your business. And those tools that we're going to talk about in detail today are clear systems, systems that allow you to have steps in place that you don't need to be thinking about each time. Automation of some of those steps, so actually taking things through to a certain point so that you can step in where your time is most valuable. And then this idea of derivatives or derivative-based products. This idea of creating something that you can sell over and over and over again. And I mentioned, for those of you who are on at the beginning, my story about starting Actionable and the desire to do something that I loved and for my wife and I to be able to live anywhere we wanted in the world. The third piece to it, or really what supported that, was the idea of only focusing on derivative-based products, things that we could create once, create to a very high level, and then sell repeatedly over and over. And to put that in the concrete, one example of this would be a book. You know, if you write a book, you write it once, and then you can sell it over and over and over again. So that's an example of a derivative-based product. We're going to go a little deeper into what that can be as well. So again, the goal, as I was saying, is consistent business growth, where we're not going through these cycles of time for dollars and money coming in and out and fluctuating, but rather to create a steady baseline where revenue is coming in on a regular basis. So one of the ways that I have seen to do that most effectively was came from a guy named James Slezak. And James Slezak is an Australian. He's got a couple books, and he's a psychologist. And James talks about something called the engagement curve. And this idea has really resonated with me, and we've worked to integrate this into everything that we do. And if you're not familiar with the engagement curve of James Slezak, basically this is built around trust. It's built around the idea that if you have a website and someone comes to your website and what you are selling is a $20,000 product and you're trying to sell that through your website, that can be an extremely difficult sell to make because that person doesn't know you, really, right? There's no trust established. There's no relationship established. And asking someone to pull out their credit card and enter it in for $20,000, first of all, may be logistically challenging, but also doesn't allow, it's a binary decision. They either buy that or they don't. Right? And that's an extreme example, but I see consultants, particularly consultants charging a good buck for their time, where that's it, right? It's either you hire me for $5,000 or $7,000 or $10,000 a day or not, right? And what we really want to do with James Slezak's engagement curve is say, yes, when someone has a high level of trust established with you, when they know the value that you can provide to them and their business, then they will spend that money, you know, assuming that they have a need that you can solve. That, if you're looking at the graph, is point E. That's the top end of the spectrum. That's where people are spending a lot of money because over a long period of time, they have built a high level of trust with you. But if it takes a year to build that level of trust, you're going to be broke and working at Starbucks before you can actually get to that point. You need no knock on anybody who works at Starbucks. It's wonderful coffee. But the idea is that we want to have steps where they can connect with you along the way that requires a lower level of buy-in. And that's this idea with having the ABCD, and you can have an infinite number of letters along that curve. But appreciating that at the beginning of the relationship, when they're first hearing about you, when they first stumbled on your website, or they heard you speak at a conference, or whatever the case may be, we want to have a way that they can engage with you in a very low commitment standpoint. So the base level of that might be that they subscribe for your newsletter. And it's funny, Becky and I were talking about newsletters before the call. This can be a really great way, and it's a starting point, right, to get people in there. But then the biggest challenge that I see is people go from that to, okay, and then I also have this $20,000 product, right, and we're skipping, again, those steps in the middle. So we can get frustrated. The sales cycle can take a long time. We can, not have the income coming in that we need. So what we really want to do is incrementally build pieces along there. So my encouragement for you is to make a list of all the activities that you charge for, things that people could be giving something to you for. And I say giving something because they could give you money, and that's sort of the obvious one, but there could also be a point of giving you time or attention. If you're asking them to read a weekly newsletter that you're sending out each week, that's them spending something, right? Spending something fairly precious, which is their time and attention to come on board. So maybe it's something simpler than that as a starting point. Maybe the A point on there is actually watch this 3-minute video on my website. And that's the smallest unit of commitment that they can make. And then it's sign up for the newsletter and check it out on a weekly basis. And then maybe it's come to this hour-long webinar that I'm hosting where you can learn more about something else I'm offering or another program or product that I have that is $200. And after the $200 program, what would it look like to have a $500 offering and $1,000 and a $10,000? You know, love him or hate him, the guy who does this exceptionally well is Mr. Anthony Robbins. He's the guy who gets you with a $12 book, and from the $12 book, it's the $49 course, and then it's the $1,000 course, and his top program is like 125 grand a year, and he works through that curve. And what you want to appreciate as a consultant is that it's also, you could look at this as a pyramid too. The largest number of people are going to engage with you at the bottom level. And then a percentage of those are going to engage at the next level, and the next level, and the next level, and the next level. But you want to have those steps in place so that they can work through all those different pieces. So here's the really interesting part, in particular as a consultant. You know, you've heard the adage that you should be focused on a particular market or a particular niche. The level of complexity involved with building one engagement curve is significant. It'll take you a while to figure this out, to determine what the various steps are, where people would naturally drop off, or where someone can jump in at an A as opposed to a D, depending on how they engage with you. All of that can be calculated and figured out using Google Analytics and using some assessment tools. If you have multiple audiences, if you say, so I deal with the marketing department of a company, oh, and I also deal with small business owners, oh, and I also sell to people in life coaching or people in transition, what you've ultimately got is multiple engagement curves. Because if you try to put all of those different audiences on the same curve, you know, A and D may apply to one group, and B, C, and E apply to another group, but the message is going to be confused because they're going to be in at A, go, yeah, this is really good, what's next? And then you show them what's next, and it's not relevant to them, and they go, actually, you know what, I don't think this is for me. And then they're gone, right? Because attention is in such short supply, we need to make sure that we're totally dialed in on what that specific audience is and what the various steps are along the curve to help them engage with you. The other point that I'd make in terms of trading time for dollars is that you want to determine at what level across this curve, so maybe it's point C, maybe it's D, maybe it's only E, that it's actually trading time for dollars. That it's actually you going on site or doing a public thing or whatever it is where you need to show up, right, either virtually or physically. The stuff below we want to have automated. We want to have systems in place where we create it. So with A, right, when they sign up for your digest, obviously that's an easy one. They should be signing up and you don't need to do anything. They're just added to your newsletter, right? But for B, people go, well, I'll do a 1-hour coaching call for B, right, and that's the $100 or whatever. Okay, but that's still your time. Right? So is there something else that you can package for $100 that's maybe worth $500 to your audience, but that's the piece that you sell at B where they can buy it automatically, right? And there's great, when you look at tools like Shopify and other online shopping carts that exist now, it's very easy for non-technical people like myself to be able to create things online that people can purchase from you, right? In particular, if you're a consultant, this is information marketing. This is the stuff where you can package things in a way that allow you to sell it over and over and over again. And the level of sophistication, the level of value you provide in those things can be built in at various points along the spectrum. So we need to know who the audience is. We need to know what need we're addressing. So we're tapping in on all 5 of those or different variations of that. We need to have a solution that makes sense to them and is economically viable for them. And then you also want to create some sort of incentive, some sort of a hook as to why they would want to buy into that thing now. And so whether it's a launch date of something, whether it's a discount early bird rate, whether it's a limited time or a limited supply of something, I'm not a fan of false alarmist strategies, right? Only 3 left, and then you come back 4 days later, and there's only 3 left. That's nonsense. People see right through that. But if you can create something legitimate, for example, our Business Builder Bootcamp, which I'll tell you about a little bit at the end, there's only 25 spots for that. That's legitimate. We know that that's the group size that we best serve. And so when it's full, it's full. We run it twice a year. And so that creates a sense of urgency with people. So when people are learning about the Business Builder Bootcamp, they can decide in the moment, okay, is this actually something that is valuable to me? Is it worth it to me? And if so, I better sign up now because it may sell out, right? So pieces like that. We need to give them a reason to buy now. So hopefully that gives you a sense of some thinking here. So I think I started an exercise and I got derailed in my own head. I have notes, but I'm totally ignoring them. The idea with this, the way to work through this for yourself is make a list of all the things that you currently sell. Determine which audience they're for. Who is the ideal client for that particular thing? And how many different engagement curves should you have based on how many audiences you have? because again, it's a different engagement curve for each different audience. And so if you have 12 different audiences, my encouragement is simplify that, right? Cut down to the one that's the best for you, unless you have a full team, right? In which case maybe you can do 2, right? Like just to put it in context, so we have a full team of 10 at Actionable Books, and we have 2 engagement curves, 1 for HR managers and 1 for consultants, and that's it. Right? And we used to have like 6, and now we don't, and business has done that because we've focused. And I think, coming back to the whole idea of how we've doubled every year for the last 3 years, a big part of it is that the engagement curve and mapping it out, drawing it on paper, has actually put in front of me, we are way too scattered, right, earlier. And so the continual refinement and focus of who is that audience, what's their pain point, do we have solutions that make sense for them, and how do we price that in a way and position it in such a way that it makes sense for them to buy it now. Just those 4 basic questions has done remarkable things for streamlining and, as an extension of that, speeding up the growth of Actionable. So I encourage you to do the same. Build a list of all the things you're selling, figure out who the audience is there multiple engagement curves, where are the holes in your engagement curve up the spectrum, where could you plug something in, what could you create that would fill a void in there. Again, appreciating that lower down on the engagement spectrum doesn't even need to be cash. You're not charging them for something. You are driving a higher level of engagement through them committing to something, and more commitment until they're opening their wallets in a way that makes sense. So that's my tip for you on sort of overcoming the base part of the consultant paradox. So this is fine and good, but if you are one of those people like me who after you do this exercise go, I have 4 audiences, right, and I have 27 different products sort of, and they're all sort of half-baked, or my favorite response, right, is, well, I just customize for everyone I meet. Fine, and that's totally cool. But here's the thing, right, you want to get clear on, are you building a business or are you a freelancer? And that's the big question for you. If you are custom building something for every client that you work with, then you are a freelancer. And you're not a business owner. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's appreciating what the difference is. If you want to scale the business dramatically and rise beyond a point where it's you on site all the time, we need to start productizing. We need to start packaging. And of course, in every client engagement, it's going to be customized, it's going to be tweaked, it's going to be revised for their specific circumstances, particularly higher up on the spectrum. But the lower down stuff needs to be productized in a way that you can sell volume and sell while you're not actually in front of your computer or in front of your client. So ask yourself, and it's a legitimate question, am I a freelancer or am I a business owner? And there's nothing wrong with either one, but acknowledging which one you are allows you to make those tough decisions. Because as suppliers, as people that care about our clients, right, we genuinely want to create exactly what they want, and so we want to customize every time. It's actually easier to customize than it is to productize, and productization is what's going to allow you to build equity into your practice. Business owners build equity, and equity requires that the business has and generates revenue without the need for your personal involvement. So there's my little soapbox piece there, but it's important that we think about that. Okay, so here's what I have taken away from David Allen's work, better known for his Getting Things Done model. If you haven't read Making It All Work, I actually prefer it. I know it's sacrilege for the GTD fans out there, but I prefer it to Getting Things Done. It has, to me, a lot more big picture around why am I even trying to optimize and get to inbox zero? What's the point aside from gamifying my business day? Making It All Work does a really nice job of helping you appreciate the different levels of view on your business. There's a time to be in the weeds, doing stuff, copy editing, whatever, and there's a time to be zoomed out and to really saying, what am I working towards? Am I on track for that, and why does that matter to me? So what I have built into my calendar, and the caveat here is that in no way is this a perfect execution. Okay? I don't think anyone actually does this exactly the way they say they're going to, but it's in my calendar. I do my absolute best. I put an hour a week to take a step back and say, what was accomplished in the last week? What's coming up in the week ahead? And how does that map into my quarterly objectives? That's the tie. How does the weekly tie into the quarterly? Okay? Then on a monthly basis, take a 4-hour session. This is by just me, by the way. I have a team and we do the team version, but this is just for me. I do a half day on a monthly basis. I get out of the office, I go to a coffee shop, and I sit down, I take a look at the monthly. What did we accomplish? What are we planning on for next month? How does it tie into the annual objectives? Right? Are we on track? Is this mapping or not? On a quarterly basis, it's a full day. I try to go off-site, do something nice. I usually try to tie a dinner in for myself because I really like good food and good wine. And so I sit down and I will go through, from the quarter, what did we accomplish? What are we planning for the next quarter? What do we need from a resource standpoint? How's this mapping out? And how does this tie into the overarching picture of where I want the business to go in the next 3 to 5 years? So we're always jumping a level, and just to sort of stress that point, on the weekly basis, we're looking at quarterly. On the monthly, we're looking at annual. On the quarterly, we're looking at 3 to 5 years. And then on an annual basis, this is the big mother, right? This is where you step back and actually say, okay, what happened in the last year? What's happening in the year ahead? And how is this trending to where I want my life to go? Right? Big, terrifying questions. I have a guide that maybe, Becky, I can send to you and you can send out as far as what to work through, what questions you can ask yourself. But this idea of reflecting on what's happened, visualizing what's going to happen, and then building a plan around leveraging what has happened in the last period of time and how it's going to support the next period of time allows you to keep this continuity and allows you to stay focused on the tasks and projects that are geared towards filling in the gaps on the engagement curve, maybe adding layers to the engagement curve, really tightening and fleshing that out. Like I said, I think I discovered the Sleazak's engagement curve 4 years ago, and we're nowhere near completion on it, right? This is another thing that I love about it, is that you're never really done. There's always room to tighten, to refine, to build in new pieces, to identify, yeah, we've addressed most of the need, but this is one that keeps coming up, and maybe I should, add something in there that's going to address that. You can refine, and start to build a fine-tuned business that starts to make money beyond you, which is the whole idea. The biggest response I get to this when I share that, and this is, by the way, this is not just for consultants. This planning thing, I believe that if you are a human being, you should do this. My dog does this too, but no. But you should do this if you're a human being, in my opinion. And the number one response I get is, well, there's no way, right? There's no way I could take half a day a month to do this. And my thought is, if you do the math, you're looking at roughly 1.5% of your working hours if you are one of those rare breed who work 40 hours a week, which most of us work more than that. 1.5%. And you got to ask yourself, if you can't find 1.5% of your time to focus on the trajectory of your life, to me it's what are you prioritizing above that? Like, what is actually more important to you than that? It's not a lot of time. And so my strong encouragement would be to create the time. It's going to feel like extra work. It's going to be very easy not to do it. Initially, it's way easier not to do it than to do it. So that whole idea of productizing versus customizing. But if you get in the habit of doing it, your sense of calm will increase. Your sense of stress will decrease. It's powerful stuff. We joke. My wife meditates regularly, and I do quarterly reviews. Same effect. Same effect. So if you already meditate, don't replace that. Just add this in. Anyway, so this is my strong recommendation for helping stay in the business owner mindset and to stay out of the reactionary mode that we can get into when we're in a freelancer mindset, is really to be proactive, carve out that time in your calendar for the important time of reflecting, visualizing, and planning for the next step. During the reflection and planning periods, you may want to, and again, you may have different buckets, but what I found useful is thinking about all of the projects and tasks in terms of these 4 buckets. So from a sales standpoint, what am I doing to generate new leads, generate new awareness? This can include marketing, right? So, pull the curtain back. This webinar would fit into the sales bucket, not because I'm actually selling you anything, but because it's building awareness and exposing you more to Actionable if you didn't know about Actionable in the past. By the way, on that note, you just got to love serendipitous timing. If you happen to try to visit actionablebooks.com, you'll notice that the site is actually down. First time in 6 months that it's been down, and I apologize for that. We are working on it in the background, and I have the notification window up, so as soon as it's back online, you will be able to go and visit should you so choose. So I do apologize, but it's perfect timing, right? It's always that way. Anyway. So this would fit into the sales and marketing bucket. It's important to me to spread the word, particularly amongst people like the community that we have here. From a systems standpoint, this is about building in process and automation, right? So what are the things that I'm actually building in so it's not just me responding to everything, right? This could be even hiring a new bookkeeper. This could be working on MailChimp integration for the website. It could be a whole bunch of different things, but anything that is build it and have it save you time, that fits into the system bucket. Credibility would be the opportunity to play a leadership role. So this may be blog content that you're writing. This may be a book that you're working on. This may be being a guest speaker somewhere, a guest lecturer. I guess technically this could actually fit into both, right? Me being here. But this is around building your brand and your expertise where people go, oh, actually, he or she seems to know what they're talking about to some degree. So that's the credibility piece. And then content is your intellectual property. So again, you'll see overlap between the various pieces in here, but content is the stuff that you can create once and people can continue to reference that may in fact build your credibility. And if it's integrated into smooth flowing systems, then maybe it's being shared on a more regular basis, right? So those are the 4 buckets. And when I look at all projects that I'm engaged in, it's which of those buckets does it fit in? Am I ignoring one of those buckets this particular week, month, quarter, etc.? Should I be putting more or less energy? And I would suggest that they'll never be perfectly balanced. You should always, in my opinion, have a focus on one out of the 4 or so, but the other one shouldn't be ignored completely. And this is another way that we can avoid that up, down of the sales and revenue because we're keeping tabs on pieces of this as we go. One of the easiest things to do is when you're working on an active client, you're exhausted, and particularly if you're on site, right? And at the end of the day, you absolutely don't feel like doing anything work-related. If you can send out 2 emails, or if you can do 1 blog post, or if you can do 1 little thing each day that'll take you 10 minutes to do it, maybe not the blog post, but the reach out, that will allow you to keep the funnel warm, and you'll be able to stay in touch with people in a very low-stress manner. That's the other really nice thing. You are at your most effective as a salesperson when you don't need the money, right? So when you're engaged in an active contract, you're best at promoting your business and explaining it in a very non-sort of needing way. There's no ulterior motive, right? Whereas once the gig's done and you see your bank account doing this, it can be that sense of, okay, I need the next client, right? Who's going to be the next client? And so it's best to sort of move that forward. And anyway, that's sort of a side note. If we think about this in regards to this model, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, this is Stephen Covey's time management matrix, and John Maxwell's used this a lot as well. This idea of how we are naturally pulled to the things that are important and urgent, which makes total sense in our days. But then after the important and urgent, it's so easy to slip into dealing with the urgent but not important. Other people's requests, stuff that's come up. It's easier to do because you feel like a hero when you do it. It's accomplishing, it's firefighting, it's that sort of thing. We want to try to avoid the gravitational pull down to box 3 and really put a concentrated effort to stay in box 2, which is the important but not urgent. And this is the idea of those planning sessions from the Making It All Work page. This is the idea of building in the time to actually plan and think and make sure that all 4 of these buckets are covered off and to do the stuff that, it's not urgent to send out those 2 sales calls when you're in the middle of the project, but it will become urgent, and if we catch it ahead of time, then we avoid the urgency later. Box 2 is unbelievably rejuvenating, the more time we can spend in there. Box 1 and 3 will take your energy. Box 2 and box 4 will replenish your energy. Box 4 is actually typically where people go when they've burnt themselves out on box 1 and box 3. Okay. This is my little aside, but you can tell a lot about a person's schedule and sense of control in their life based on the vacations they take, in my opinion. Because if someone's going to an all-inclusive to collapse on the beach, that probably means that they're trying to escape to box 4 because box 1 and box 3 have been demanding so much of their time. If you look at people that have a really strong control over their schedules and are really in charge of their own destinies and growing in a direction that makes sense for them, when they go on vacation, they often go on adventure vacations where they're going to explore a new city or they're going to a new country or they're going to try something that stimulates them as opposed to somewhere where they can shut off their brain. So it could be a little reality check for you to check in and say, what kind of vacations am I taking? And again, nothing wrong with the all-inclusive, but just appreciating that if it's happening every vacation, maybe it's time to look at the schedule and how we're managing that. I'm waiting for 6 people to just drop off. Be like, I love my all-inclusives. Just leave the call. That's fine. You're entitled to that.
Chris, I'm wondering what it says
yeah.
about us if we never take a vacation at all.
It's a great question. Maybe we're somewhere in the box 2, box 1. So I don't know. But, when life's a vacation, Becky, then all is good, right? So on the weekly basis, the piece that I was talking about is this idea of reviewing, taking in new information, planning for the next week, the next month. On a monthly basis, we're looking at KPIs, so what were the metrics that we wanted to measure that month, what wins can we celebrate, what did we learn, how do we adjust, right? So really taking more of a scientific approach to your week, to your month, right? Saying, what did I try that I thought was going to work, what was the actual outcome from that? So that's what we're doing on a monthly basis. On a quarterly basis, we're reviewing these pieces that we were just talking about. and adjusting KPIs potentially, setting 3 priorities for the next quarter. I appreciate that I'm whipping through this. This is a whole hour of content unto itself, but just to give you context on where our brains can be going. And then on an annual basis, it's this question of what are you building? Why are you building it? What sort of progress have you had since last year? And where are you going to be a year from now? Right? I'm a big fan of visioning exercises. It's that whole idea that everything is created twice, right? Once in your mind and once on paper or once in reality. And if we can, start to play a more proactive visualization of where we want our business to go, and do that not every day, because then that's silly. You're living in the clouds, but to do it on an annual basis and to connect with it in a meaningful way, and then put intelligent systems into place and process and the proper check-ins, you can really start to build towards something that matters to you. So as far as I can go into any more of that in detail, deliberately left more time here. Just wanted to let you know a little bit about a couple of the programs that we have or things that we do with consultants. What we found is that consultants in our community fall into one of 2 camps. One is that they're stuck in that place of I have 16 clients and I don't know what my engagement curve looks like, and I don't have a proper marketing system or sales funnel or those sorts of things built up. So we have 2 programs. One is called the Business Builder Bootcamp, which is designed for those people that are probably doing fine. Your business is growing and going, but it feels very freelancy, and you want to make the move from freelance to business owner. And so that's what the Business Builder Bootcamp is designed to do. It's a 7-week program that we run twice a year. Once is launching in June, and then we run it again in the winter for North American folks. I'm going to share a link in a little bit. If you're interested in learning more about that, we'll be running a free webinar that'll go a little more in detail into how to build the 8 systems that will help you structure from freelance to business owner. It's a good program. I really like it. We're running this for our 3rd time, and we always get a great community conversation going. It's a really fun group, all going through the same thing at the same time. And then the other camp of consultants that we work with are those that have already moved to running a business and are looking to sort of supercharge that. And so we have a program called the Actionable Consultant Program, which I will not go into detail here, but basically it's leveraging all of the tools that Actionable's created into your own business so that you can create additional revenue streams. You take advantage of our additional revenue streams and community and content. Again, there's lots to go into on that, but I just wanted to sort of make you aware of the 2 paths that consultants in our community choose to go to take advantage of different pieces we have there. Yeah.
Super. So are we ready for some questions from our listeners today, Chris?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I want to invite everyone to use the question panel and share any comments or questions for Chris, and I'll be sharing those with him in the remainder of our hour together. And while we're waiting on those to come in, Chris, I did make a note here of a couple of things that really stood out to me. If you notice me looking down, it's because I'm taking a page full of notes to refer to later. But one of the things that you said that was quite powerful to me was this idea that it's easier to customize than it is to productize. And I wonder if you could share a bit more about that, and also talk a little bit about how a business owner who's in this situation of being very busy delivering work can step aside from that to create those products.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, there's 2 different ways in my mind that you can create a product. There's probably more, but for simplicity's sake. One is you go, oh, I have a good idea, and then you go away in a cave for a while, you create the whole thing, and then you take it out. You say, here it is, right? You should buy it now. That hardly ever works in my experience, because I've done that several times and wasted way too much money doing that. The other way to build it is to do what you're doing, do the work that you're already engaged in, and to take that time to step back and say, what was it about this particular thing that they loved? What pain point was it solving, and how did it address that pain point? And note that somewhere, jot it down, and then after the next client engagement, do that again. And when you start to identify trends of, this is a common pain point that I'm hearing from people on a regular basis, and this is a way that seems to work the majority of the time for addressing that pain point. What's the 80% of what you've delivered to that client that actually is core? And you may even be doing this already. We've all done that. We grab slides from a presentation and use it again in another presentation because it's relevant, right? And so if you see that or an opportunity for that, being able to take the piece that you've already created through a real customization, through a client interaction, and start to say, what would it look like if I built this into a packaged thing? And then I take it back to the client. And I would say to the client, look, you paid X for this that I did, right? Would it have been interesting to you, or what would your interest level have been if I charge you half of that for this, which is far more standardized and maybe takes 10% of your time? right? So this whole idea of a win-win, where if you could charge less to the client but use significantly less of your time, then theoretically you could do that for multiple clients, so long as it was something that was appealing to a larger audience. I think the other thing that I would say on productization, and just as I heard myself say, a larger audience, if you had 100 people buy something, right, for $1,000, then that's $100,000 you've generated from that thing. You don't need to be the next Facebook or Uber. You can have something that is productized and still applicable to a very niche market, right? There are people out there that want something very specific, and the more specific you go, the easier it is for them to find you, either through a Google search or through referrals from other people. I don't know, did that answer your question, Becky?
Well, I think so. And I do have one question that's come in from someone who's wondering, Chris, if you ever give any input to consultants who work with and are themselves nonprofits, and how might the things that you've shared today be different in that context?
Yeah, we do. We work with a number of nonprofit consultants, and I think nonprofit is fascinating in a great way, where typically your clients are in the space because they have a passion for the organization or the belief or the movement of the organization that they work with. And typically where nonprofits are most challenged is actually on the business side of their organization, which is the reverse of, again, broad brushes, but a reverse of the corporate world, where you get people that are very strong from a business system standpoint and have trouble connecting to that purpose, to that why of the organization. And so I think the advantage that you have as a nonprofit consultant is being able to really deeply connect to and publicly state that why, that purpose of what it is that you're doing, and then show that you can bring the business acumen or the organizational chops to help that organization to advance it. Because again, in my experience with nonprofits, you get a lot, not the massive ones, but the smaller ones, you get, and sometimes massive ones, you get a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm for what they're doing, and maybe not a lot of organization or structure, or as much as their for-profit counterparts would have. So there's a real opportunity with nonprofits where we've had the most success is on saying we're aligned on passion, showing them that, and then saying, and now let's advance the mission by building in more clear system structures and process.
So if the person who shared that question has any follow-up that they want to offer, I'm glad to continue that conversation on nonprofits. Chris, could you talk a little bit more about what you mean by business owners build equity, and what that looks like, and how we can know as business owners when we've achieved that building of equity?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, the definition of equity is value that exists outside yourself. Right? So if you were to leave the business or get hit by a bus or try to bequeath your business to your kids, would that actually have any value? And the value that it would have is what the equity is. So that's what we're talking about. So if you are, in one extreme example, if it's you and your website is christaylor.com and you do customized work all the time for every client and there's nothing proprietary about what you built, you have zero equity. Right? There's nothing of value to sell or to pass on to anybody. It's you. Right? When you're gone, that's it. On the other side, right, a company, any company that has, Microsoft, yes, has Bill Gates as a, sort of poster child, but they exist as a company. They have equity. They have revenue streams that exist beyond him as the founder. Obvious example. But in the small business space, particularly when we're selling intangibles, it can be, it's actually easier to build a brand around you, again, going back to the customization piece, because we can go and solve problems. If you're a charismatic person and you have good ideas, then you come up with them on the spot, you deliver fine. But it's that, and there's nothing wrong with that, again, but it's more that freelancer mentality. So if we're trying to build equity as a business owner, it's saying, how do we take that and build something off of it? Franklin Covey, really good example. Stephen Covey, right, is the guy, wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but then very quickly built systems and process and training modules that other people could deliver, and now they do about $250 million a year with a B, and he passed away a couple of years ago. And so the company is now very much a company that exists beyond him, right? So that would be the transition point.
That's helpful, Chris. So we have a follow-up question from the same listener who was asking about the nonprofits. So he's wondering, have you ever put together consultants who try to address systemic issues or problems that cross organizations? So I guess this is a question about, does Actionable Books network consultants together to solve problems?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
it's a she who's wondering. Sorry about that. I don't see the first initial here.
So the The short answer is yes. We do our best to connect the community at large. So we have various webinars, we have various online social forums where regular visitors of Actionable Books will collaborate and connect. And then the Actionable Consultant Program is that. I mean, there's 3 pillars to it. One pillar is very much around the connection of high-functioning, like-minded consultants around the globe. And we've had consultants in the ACP who have rented office space together and have collaborated, other consultants that have collaborated on big clients, and other consultants where someone is more of a systems person, someone's more of a change person, someone's more of a leadership development person, and they get together to work on bigger proposals. So yeah, in the Actionable Consultant community, we definitely do. We're also extremely particular. People apply to that program. We take about 1 in 30 who apply into the program, and so there's a high caliber of people in there that they all know that. There's a high level of trust established.
Great.
You know, aside from Actionable, though, I'm sorry, Becky, just to build off that, mastermind groups are, if you want to collaborate with other consultants that have other levels of expertise, finding a community forum, it comes back to engagement group, right, in a different context. It's that level of trust that's established. And I think one of the challenges in general with social media, with our world today, if I get on my old man soapbox, is that people go, oh, you're in that space, we should partner on that, right? Like, no, we shouldn't partner on that, right? It's this whole idea of date before you get married, right? Like, we need to get to know each other better, and ideally need to get to know each other more holistically than we might in purely an offline format. I think offline's fabulous for spreading the word, but then having an opportunity to connect with a mastermind group or some sort of peer networking group in your local market to get to know people on a deeper level allows for those much more established and really trusting relationships.
That's excellent. So this question actually speaks to that, and wondering, Chris, how important you feel online presence is for low-tech prospective community building or clients. So, maybe you're a consultant who works with people who aren't necessarily online, so how important is an online presence for that? And I obviously have an opinion.
Yeah, and I probably echo your opinion, Becky, maybe with a caveat. I think you want to take a look at where's your business going, how are you doing from a client roster standpoint. If you're feeling totally full, like if you've got clients coming at you more than you can possibly handle, then I don't know. I mean, for me, it's marketing versus sales activity, and if you have more leads coming in than you need, then you don't need to be marketing as much, particularly as long as it's ongoing. But then you need to focus on the sales side. But if you're looking for more clients, there's still value in having an online presence because, and I love this, I was talking to a guy the other day who was saying that in a business that he was in previously, his client was a mathematics PhD student. That's who they were targeting their particular thing at. And they're very difficult to find anywhere because they're typically absorbed in their own little cliques. And so what he was saying is that it's not about necessarily marketing or getting in front of that person, but instead getting in front of the people that influence that person. And so connecting with other people and that might have impact, and those people may be online. And again, I think it's, to the question, I think it's silly to rush into, I should have a Facebook page because everyone has a Facebook page and that's what I should do. There should be a strategy behind it. I think it's becoming harder to argue against an online presence at all in this day and age. But, Becky, what do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with you, Chris. I think it's important to show up online in the same powerful way that you show up in real life, and there's going to be a disconnect. Even if you think that your client isn't savvy, they are going to be vetting you online. And so if your online presence doesn't match the value that you can bring in real life, there could be a disconnect or a credibility issue that would happen.
I feel like there was a great podcast episode about this, Becky. Wasn't there a podcast?
I think we had a conversation about that, Chris, and perhaps in the follow-up email I'll include a link so folks can access that podcast in which we had a conversation about that very topic.
It was a good one, too. I like that one.
It was fun, indeed. So here's a fun question that we had come in, not really necessarily related to this topic for consultants, but Christy is curious about the favorite place that you've lived or how the different cultures that you've lived in, worked in, have affected your work.
Yeah, good question, Christy. So, excuse me, I was terrified when we moved. The first move was a move to Spain for 9 months, and it's only about a 6-hour time difference, but I was terrified because I'm used to running out and dealing with clients, and it was the best thing I ever did for my business because it forced me into the productization mindset. I was no longer able to say, yeah, I'll come by, cash is tight, I'll go deliver a keynote, or I'll go do an on-site client session and custom build it for that particular situation. It forced me into the product. So it was sort of like that whole burn your boats thing, and it was amazing. And business did that right the year that I was gone. So much so that I started to have a little self-worth doubt. It was just like, well, maybe I just sort of got out of the way a long time ago. The team seems to be doing great without me. But I think it's that shift into product mindset. Favorite place is so hard because to me, every place has something different to offer. So Spain, I love Spain. Spain is probably my favorite country to live in. Barcelona's right up there with Vancouver, British Columbia, and Chicago as the cities that I most love to visit. But it depends on what you're looking for, right? I mean, we were in Panama. My wife loved Panama. I loved it too. I got a little tired of the bugs the size of my head coming in the middle of the night. So, yeah, you take the good with the bad. So, yeah, it's got its trade-offs. But I think it's a matter of experimenting. I've got actually a book coming out in May called Beyond the Picket Fence, and it's about this. It's about how do you find the place. And me saying that Spain is awesome shouldn't mean anything to you aside from maybe it's, oh, it's interesting. Maybe I'll go check it out in more detail, but not to go, okay, Spain is the best.
Chris says so.
Yeah, exactly.
So along those lines, as we're talking about location, Denise is wondering, Chris, do you recommend that business owners move to other territories to expand their businesses?
I think, yeah, as long as you're not sort of burning the tail behind you. So if you're going to go do that, fine. And it may make sense, I don't know your business, obviously, so it may make sense to do that. You may need to be on site for kickoffs, that sort of thing. But it shouldn't be sacrificing or cannibalizing the first market. Right? I mean, the whole idea of moving to a new market is expansion, not replacement. Replacement? So the idea of making sure that the system is in place and it is continually generating capital to then go to the next place makes the most sense. And I can tell you from personal experience, I tried to expand to Europe too soon, and it ended up cannibalizing part of the North America presence. So then we sort of scaled back on Europe to the point of pretty much closed Europe, focused on North America for another year, got it established, then expanded into Australia based on actual market data as opposed to just where I wanted to live, and was able to grow both because this was systematized and built. So I think the answer is, as always, it depends. And just be careful as to why you're doing it.
Sure. So I think that we have room for maybe one or two more questions before our hour together is up. And the one I'm going to share with you next comes from Santiago, and he's wondering, could you expand more on the systems aspect needed to protect the long-term goals?
Yeah, great question, Santiago. The idea with that is sort of actually in line with Denise's question of, if your long-term goal personally is to go live somewhere other than your core market, then you're going to have those objectives in parallel, right? You have the business objectives and you have your personal objectives. And as a consultant, you have the dubious benefit of being able to blend both, right? It can be challenging at times too, because which one takes priority? So the idea with the systems is that before you advance the next thing, whatever it is, the first thing needs to be systematized in such a way that it requires a little bit of management time. It's never going to be totally self-sufficient. I shouldn't say never, but typically not. But before you move on to the next thing, it needs to be established enough, and that requires systems. And so what I mean by systems is a clear, documented, repeatable process that can generate results, whatever those results look like in your universe. Roger Martin, who wrote a couple great books, talked about this in The Design of Business, where he talks about how any new venture goes through three distinct phases. It goes from the mystery of we have no idea, we're sort of dabbling, we're trying something out, into the heuristic, which is I can do this really well, I can deliver it repeatably, but I couldn't really teach somebody how to do it, and then down to algorithmic, which is now there's a process around this and it will require some personal flavor, but by and large it is built and structured in a way that can be replicated. And if you look at any initiative that you're engaged in, we need to take it to that algorithmic portion, again, assuming that we want to build a business that has equity, and assuming that our industry or the audience that we're working with is interested in buying that algorithmic version of the heuristic version, then that's where we want to get to before we start over again or move into the next piece.
Got it. So could you repeat those three stages for us, Chris, just for those who are taking notes like I am?
Yeah, absolutely. So mystery is the first stage.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I'm going to use the example of all examples of innovation, right? So the mystery stage for Apple was there's got to be a better way for people to consume music on the go. Okay, we don't know what it is yet. We don't know how to solve that. But we just know there's something here that we want to address, right? And then they create the first iPod. And somewhat by accident, they create this global phenomenon. Of course, they hope that it goes well, but that's ridiculous. No one could have projected that as a success sort of takeoff, right, for the whole idea of the iPod. So now you're in this mystery. It's like, wow, we did it once, and look at the response we're getting. How do we do it again, right? How do we further refine that? And so then they start to play with it, and they come up with things like the Nano and the Shuffle and the Touch and all the different versions of it. So it's not revolutionary, but it's refining, it's tweaking, it's changing, it's providing for different audiences. And so they've gone through that cycle. So it's mystery, heuristic, algorithmic is the three process. And the book that's fabulous is The Design of Business, written by Roger Martin, who used to be the dean at Rotman School of Management at University of Toronto.
Awesome. So we can maybe get that info from you and include it in our follow-up email to this group, Chris.
Yeah, we'll put the summary there too.
So I'm going to give you one last question to wrap, which I find a fun question. It comes from John, and he says that the true value that he finds and the best-selling point in business is building a personal relationship with the client. And he's wondering, when productizing, how you can keep the relationship personal.
Yeah, huge point, John, and I'm so glad someone brought it up, because this is also another piece of pushback, right, is they trust me, they buy from me. If I productize, doesn't it make it anonymous and non-personal? And sure, it could if you let it, but it doesn't have to. And I would say that there's a couple different pieces to consider in that. One is when you're building a suite of products, helping a client determine which product makes the most sense for them plays that concierge trusted advisor service, and you can play a real role in saying, I think this is the best thing for you if you legitimately believe that, right? And it's 10% of the cost of if I came in and did it for you, right, as one example. The second thing I would say with that is that this actually may not be for the client that you have the personal relationship with. That's another way to frame it, right? The clients that you have the personal relationship with are paying you more because it's your time for dollars. And that doesn't go away, but it gets complemented by a suite of offerings that people could buy if they're not ready to go to this phase yet. And so they actually start to build a relationship with you, even though it's not face-to-face having lunch or coffee sort of relationship with you. Right? Again, boot camp is a great example. I run the webinar, people see me on screen for an hour, and they go, I feel a little bit of something towards this person. I get, what he's about to a degree. Then we go into boot camp, we're talking in a group setting. Then if they want to go into ACP, it's more one-on-one setting. And then if they wanted personal coaching or something, then it's really, truly intimate. So it's again, going back to the engagement spectrum, John, it's about ramping up to it, and it's not replacing those high engagement relationships that you have.
That is really helpful. Well, Chris, this has been an absolutely astoundingly valuable hour, and I'm so glad that you chose to spend it with us, and I know those who have been on the call have appreciated that as well. As we wrap up the hour, Chris, what are the best ways that people can stay in touch with you? And then also, just so you know, I will be sending out a follow-up email with some links and other resources that Chris has referenced today. But Chris, tell us.
Yeah, under normal circumstances, you could find us at actionablebooks.com. I was hoping that we'd have it repaired by now, but apparently the site is still down, or certain pages are anyway. I think you can still go to the home page, but you can't go to any of the summaries. But if you have a little patience and want to come back later on, actionablebooks.com, or just at actionablechris is my Twitter handle. And if you want to talk about any of this in more detail, I'm happy to do that as well.
I know I have 1,000 questions for you, Chris, and I'm sure some of the others would like to connect with you later as well. So again, thank you to all of you who have been a part of this event today. I just had a comment, Chris, that came through that said this is the best webinar that the listeners heard in ages, and thank you. And thank you from me, and have a fantastic day, everyone. We look forward to learning with you again in the future.
Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.